Morning. Thank you, Tom, for that great introduction. And like he said, I am a relatively new addition to the BPU. Just a disclaimer, as most of you know, I am a staff member of BPU, and as such, I don't represent necessarily the views of the board or any of the board members in this presentation. What I'm going to do today is mostly talk about where we are in terms of the topic of today, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. So what we got? Actually, Tom was understating what we have installed. We have right now more than 4.4 gigawatts, and very little tiny bit of wind, generating approximately 5 million megawatt hours per year, and that accounts for about 6.8% of our total retail sales of electricity in the state. We do this at a current program cost of a little over $1 billion a year, which is borne by ratepayers, which, if you do the math, comes out to $212 per megawatt hour. This is from the 2021 RPS compliance reports, so that's, the new reports are due to come out any moment now, and you will see this updated numbers coming from us shortly. So, when you're looking at what in-state versus out-of-state, we are relatively procuring a lot of our renewable capacity out-of-state. So, about 25% right now is in-state, but as you can see, that number is growing. At the same time, though, our in-state renewables are way more expensive for us right now than out-of-state procurement of RECs. But that number is dropping. So those are both going into the right direction from our perspective, but we still have a long way to go. And that multiple of 16 times as expensive to procure in-state renewables versus out-of-state, that will have to come down to make it more affordable for New Jersey ratepayers if we want to deploy the amount of renewables that we have to deploy to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. So what do we currently have in the pipeline? Well, the biggest renewables in the pipeline right now is our offshore wind, and that is almost 4 gigawatts with an estimated annual production of 16 million megawatt hours per year. So that's a lot of renewables scheduled to come online. Solar is in the current registration pipeline. We have about 700 megawatts. But as you know, solar has a bit less capacity factor than offshore wind, so that accounts for proportionally less annual production, a little less than 1 million megawatt hours per year. Those numbers together would amount to 23% of our current energy retail sales. So if you add that up with the 7% that we are at today, we're getting to almost 30% if we build everything that's in the pipeline. Now, if you're talking about cost, offshore wind is quite a bit less expensive than solar at this point, and in terms of what is currently projected to get built. Now, having said that, there's a couple of things asterisks to make, especially the offshore wind projects will mostly come online starting around 24 to 2030, whereas the solar projects that are in the pipeline today are going to come online in the next 2 years, most of them. And we also have a different way of distributing risk. The OREM mechanism puts actually a lot of the risk of energy and capacity sales onto the ratepayers, whereas in solar that's mostly borne by the solar owners. And we are still going down in cost. quite rapidly. And like I said, that's something that we have to deal with in the future as well. And finally, we need both. In terms of generation and reliability, as you know, solar is mostly during the day, and in the summer, offshore wind is for a large part at night and in the winter. So the two are very nice complements in terms of generation. And we in New Jersey feel we need both to meet our goals. So what's happening now? We're adding to the pipeline. And as you probably know, there is a third procurement going on for offshore wind for another 1,200 to 4,000 megawatt capacity with estimated deployment in 2030. We're also just closed the first annual competitive solar incentive program solicitation, which has a target of 300 megawatts of grid-scale solar plus 160 megawatt hours of storage. And that is scheduled to come online between now and 2026. And you probably all were waiting for this. I'm very happy to say that we finally met our timeline of the end of first quarter in announcing the new straw for the solar energy program, which has both, I like that one, which has 225 megawatts proposed in both energy year 24 and 25. So there's a lot going on. And if you look at it further out, the structure of the current programs as well as the estimated deployment are about at least 750 megawatts per year of solar deployment and another offshore wind solicitation every 2 years from 25 to 31 for 1,200 megawatts. So there's a lot going on even with the current policies just being implemented. And as you know, it takes a while for policies that are trying the law to actually become reality, but we're getting there. What that would mean in terms of projections is in 2030 we are estimated to have a total renewables generating capacity of somewhere between 12,500 and 16,500 megawatts, with a actual annual production between 26 and 43 million megawatt hours. Now that is well in line or ahead of the projections under the 2020 Energy Master Plan. Looking even further out, in 2040, if we just project out the current policy, we're looking at 37,000 megawatts with a generating capacity, generation of over 65 million megawatt hours per year. That's a significant chunk of our current energy usage. Of course, with the electrification efforts going underway, that usage is expected to increase further, and we might have to deal with it. Now, it's not enough to just incentivize new generation. You also have to make sure that it gets built. And that's why the board is doing a lot of efforts to enable this in-state deployment. A key part of this is, for instance, the state agreement approach that is building transmission proactively for offshore wind. Many of you would know and are involved in the grid mod proceedings, which are mainly there to enable further faster solar interconnection onto the grid. There is a storage incentive program under development, and that would include in the current straw a carbon intensity reduction incentive. So if you store energy at a time that the grid is less carbon intense and release it at a time that the grid is highly carbon intense, you get a higher incentive. And finally, we're also working on a dual use that was passed in legislation in 2021. Now, just a little bit more broadly, we're, as you all aware, Executive Order 315 has this technology-agnostic clean energy attribute certificate as part of the Executive Order. And it also directs the board to include the 100% of electricity sold to be derived from clean sources in 2035 in the new 2024 Energy Master Plan that is going to be created. And finally, since we're talking clean energy, rather than just renewables in the context of these executive orders and these new initiatives, we have to look at our current nuclear fleet providing approximately 40% of retail sales. And just a funny anecdote, I just came back from the Netherlands, which is where I was born. And the Netherlands is way ahead of New Jersey in terms of renewables deployment. They have a lot of offshore wind. They are installing about 2.5 gigawatts of solar every year in the last couple of years. And the country is about twice as big, both in population and in geography as New Jersey. So we're still not at the same level. But because they have closed pretty much all their nuclear, they are only at about 30% carbon-free generation, whereas in New Jersey we're almost at 50%. And that's at this point still thanks to the nuclear fleet that we have ongoing. So with that, I'm quite happy to be here, and thank you all.